For centuries, certain ancient texts have been shrouded in mystery, feared by many, and whispered to be the devil's own handiwork. 10 ancient books said to be cursed by the devil himself. First up, the Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas. Our first stop takes us to the 13th century, to the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible. Now, this massive manuscript, measuring 92 centimeters tall and 50 centimeters wide, contains a collection of texts, including the Old and New Testaments, as well as various apocryphal works. Now, according to legend, the scribe who created the Codex Gigas made a pact with the devil to complete the manuscript in a single night. As the story goes, the scribe succeeded, but at a terrible cost. His soul was forever bound to the book. The Codex Gigas is a compilation of various texts, including the Old and New Testaments, the work of Flavius Josephus, the work of Isidore of Seville, medical texts, including the works of Galen, and a collection of spells. Now, incantations, also magical formulas. According to legend, the Codex was created by a monk named Herman the Recluse, who was said to have made a pact with the devil in order to complete the manuscript in one single night. Like I mentioned a minute ago, the story goes that Herman was unable to complete it on his own, so he called upon the devil for assistance. The devil agreed to help Herman, but at the cost of his soul. The Codex is currently housed at the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it is considered one of the library's most valuable and famous holdings. The manuscript is in relatively good condition, considering its age, and is still bound in its original leather cover. The Codex Gigas had a significant influence on Western culture, particularly in the realm of literature and art. Now, the manuscript's depiction of the devil has been, reproduced and parodied countless times, and its legend has inspired numerous works of fiction and art. Number 2, the Picatrix. Now, next we travel to the 11th century, to the realm of Islamic mysticism, where we find the infamous Picatrix. Now, this ancient grimoire, written in Arabic, contains a collection of magical rituals and incantations. The Picatrix is said to hold the secrets of the occult, and those who dare to read its pages are believed to be cursed by the devil himself. One legend tells of a powerful sorcerer who, after mastering the Picatrix, was consumed by an insatiable lust for power, ultimately leading to his downfall. Now, the Picatrix contains a wide range of magical and occult knowledge, including astrological tables and charts, instructions for creating magical talismans and amulets, recipes for magical potions and elixirs, techniques for divination and scrying, and rituals for invoking spirits and demons. The Picatrix has been translated into several languages, including Latin, Spanish, and English. The most well-known translation is the Latin version, which was produced in the 15th century. Now, in recent years, several modern editions of the Picatrix have been published, including a critical edition of the Arabic text and an English translation. The Picatrix has been the subject of several controversies and criticisms, including accusations of promoting black magic and demonic invocation, criticisms of the text's perceived misogyny, and debates as well over the text's authenticity and historical accuracy. Despite these controversies, the Picatrix remains a significant and influential text in the history of Western spirituality. Number 3, the Book of Abramelin. In the 15th century, a Jewish Kabbalist named Abraham von Worms penned the Book of Abramelin, a mystical text that promised to reveal the secrets of the universe. However, this book came with a terrible warning. Those who attempted to follow its instructions would be cursed by the devil. One story tells of a young man who, after reading the book, became obsessed with the occult, eventually losing his mind and his soul to the devil. The book is perhaps the most famous for its description of the Abramelin operation, which is a complex and demanding ritual that aims to attain spiritual enlightenment and communicate with the divine. Now, the Book of Abramelin has had a significant influence on Western occultism, particularly in the areas of ceremonial magic and thuggery. Now, the text has been studied and used by numerous occultists and magicians, including Aleister Crowley, who considered it one of the most important magical texts of all time. Number 4, the Goetia. The Goetia, also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon, is a 17th century grimoire that contains a collection of demonic seals and incantations. This book is said to hold the power to summon and control demons, but at a very terrible cost. According to legend, those who dare to use the Goetia will be cursed by the devil and forced to endure a lifetime of torment and suffering. One story tells of a young woman who, after using the Goetia to summon a demon, was driven mad by the entity's constant whispers in her calendar year. You know, the Goetia lists 72 demons, each with their own unique powers and attributes. Some of the better known demons are Asmodeus, the demon of lust and desire, Beelzebub, if I'm pronouncing that right, the demon of flies and disease, Azazel, the demon of sacrifice and scapegoating, and Belial, the demon of deceit and corruption. The Goetia has been accused of promoting black magic and demonic invocation, but despite these claims, it does remain a very significant and influential text in the history of Western occultism.
Okie dokie folks, are you ready for some more fun cult stuff? Okay, so you've all heard about Scientology, right? The cult that pretty much owns Tom Cruise and a bunch of other celebrities. Well, it turns out that their original founder wrote a book that he alleged caused people to take their own lives. And if that isn't magically inclined in some way, I don't know what is. It prompts reflection on the power dynamics between the written word, belief systems, and the vulnerability of the human psyche. So what is it about this text that can drive individuals to the brink? Well, apparently it's the allure of the unknown, the manipulation of belief systems, maybe a combination of factors that pushes people beyond the boundaries of reason. So we've talked about this guy before, L. Ron Hubbard. He was discussing the Atlantis civilization, and he claimed to have gained this knowledge through his own research and experiences. Am I gonna pretend like I know how he experienced those things? Nope. But here's the thing. This piece of writing has been almost entirely erased from the internet. If you're more tech savvy than I am, feel free to add links in the comments section, but outside of venturing into the dark web, I couldn't find a copy of this specific work anywhere, or a listing on any official record of all of this. The erasure of almost all mentions of this book from the vast expanse of the internet only adds to the mystery in my mind. In this crazy digital age where I can Google whatever I want, the ability to expunge a work from the digital realm raises quite a few questions about the extent of control over the narrative, not to sound like my university profs. It's as if the book itself has become this elusive specter, lingering in the shadows of cyberspace. Now, I'm not completely oblivious to the control that present-day Scientology has in our society, but it's really scary to see it in practice. Like, their attempt to erase any traces of this work raises so many ethical questions about the control of information. In this digital age, where information is considered a cornerstone of freedom, the deliberate suppression of a narrative kind of is like, what the heck? Like, what other forbidden books are there? Just like waiting in the shadows that I don't even know about, waiting to disturb some minds out there. Well, there's the Shams al-Ma'arif, or Shams al-Ma'arif wa Lata'if al-Awarif, which is a 13th century grimoire centered on Arabic magic and has claimed to be a manual for achieving esoteric spirituality. I apologize from the bottom of my heart if I butchered that pronunciation anyway, I promise I did practice. It was written by the scholar Ahmed al-Buni, who wrote it while living in Algeria. He passed around 1225 Common Era. It was written by the scholar Ahmed al-Buni, who wrote it while living in Algeria, and he passed around 1225 Common Era. Now, the book is a patchwork of bits and pieces of the author's authentic works, and texts by other authors. Scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah have criticized the book and labeled al-Buni as a deluded devil worshipper. Good to know that across all religions over time, some things never changed. Now, in terms of more modern examples, that was a common assumption from Ed and Lorraine Warren. You know, the demonologist that I quote all the time. Look, I believe half of what they investigated was real, the other half was them making a living, which at the end of the day, I have to give some respect to. Well, minus viewing alternative lifestyles outside of Christianity as a sin. Okay, pardon me, sorry, I get a little sidetracked. In contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, the Shams al-Ma'arif al-Kubra and the Shams al-Ma'arif al-Sughra, with the former being the larger of the two. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares, and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author claims is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. The table of contents that were introduced in the later printed editions of the work contain a list of unnumbered chapters, which stretched to a number of 40 by the way. However, prior to the printing press and various other standardizations, there were 3 independent volumes that circulated, each one differing in length. While being popular, it also carries a notorious reputation for being suppressed and banned for much of Islamic history, ergo how it found its way to our list today. Don't read it. However, it continues to persist in being read and studied up to present day, despite its questionable veracity and negative implications. Some Sufi orders, such as the Naqshbandi Haqqani order, have recognized its legitimacy and use as a compendium for the occult and hold it in high respect. Now, another title by the same author, the title having been translated to the Source of the Essentials of Wisdom, is considered its companion text. In terms of translation, although the overall formal translation to English hasn't really happened yet, there have been numerous renditions of a few of the more popular rituals found within the main treatise, as well as those that line its accompanying text. So, don't bother, don't go near it. Okay folks, I think I'm gonna end today with the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic, the MMDM, or Liber Incantationum Exorcium et Fascinatorium Varium. Let me try that again. The MMDM, or, well, let's see if I can get this folks, Liber Incantationum Exorcimorum et Fascinationum Verum is a 15th century grimoire manuscript. The text, composed in Latin, is largely concerned with demonology and necromancy. Richard Kiekeffer edited the text of the manuscript in 1998 under the title Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century. Portions of the text in English translation are presented in Forbidden Rites as well, embedded within the author's essays and explanations on the Munich manual in specific and grimoires in general. The Russian translation of this Latin grimoire was published in 2019, while the first English translation only came out last year. Now, there is only one known surviving manuscript of the original Munich manual, which is almost complete except for the first 2 folios that describe the beginning of the first ritual. The rest of the grimoire contains complete instructions for the invocation of demons such as, Satan, Lilith, Asaroth, and Samael, as well as the supposed attainment of favors and supernatural powers from them. Some of the spells allow for obtaining the love of a woman, achieving invisibility, acquiring wealth and treasures, or gaining knowledge. The text is accompanied by over 40 illustrations of magic circles and symbols to be used in said rituals. So, for example, page 130 to 133 of the text includes a list of 11 demons, similar to the Ars Goetia, and since there's only 11, I guess I could list them off. So we've got Count/Duke Barbarus, Duke Cassin, President/Count Otius, King Curson, Duke Alugor, Prince Tub, President Volak, Duke Generon, Marquis Tuveries, President Hani, and Marquis Sukax. I promise I did my best. Most of the text is in Latin, which is not a language I speak, with the exception of 2 appended materials in German and Italian. So let's see, we got messing with demons and manipulation of others to your will? Yeah, no thanks, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Hebrew apocalyptic religious text, ascribed by tradition to the patriarch Enoch, who is the father of Methuselah and the great-grandfather of Noah. So this contains unique material on the origins of demons and more, along with why some angels fell from heaven, an explanation of why the Genesis flood was morally necessary, and an exposition of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. So there's at least 3 books that are traditionally attributed to this prophet, including the distinct works 2 and 3. None of those are considered to be canonical scripture by most Jewish or Christian church bodies. Ergo, why a lot of folks want this kind of banned and out of the way. The older sections of it are estimated to date from about 300 to 200 BC. The latest part is about like 100 BC. A lot of scholars believe this was originally written in probably Hebrew, since these were the languages first used for Jewish texts. Now, some folks suggest that this, kind of like the Book of Daniel, was composed partially in Hebrew, but fun fact, no Hebrew version has survived. The individuals residing in the Qumran caves, where the Dead Sea Scrolls and the book were unearthed, were not aligned with the mainstream Jewish sect known as the Pharisees. Instead, they were affiliated with a splinter group who adhered to distinctive practices. So, ergo, this book, alongside numerous other texts discovered in the caves, is recognized for its substantial variance from things that we know. So authors of the New Testament were also familiar with some content of the stories. Like a short section of 1 Enoch is cited in the New Testament of Jude, and attributed there to Enoch the 7th from Adam. But this is kind of a variance on a lot of other things that are more mainstream. Copies of the earlier sections of Enoch 1 were preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls, like I mentioned already. So this book only survives in its entirety in Ethiopic translation. Yes, it is part of the biblical canon used by the Ethiopian Jewish community, as well as the Christian Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but a lot of other groups regard it as non-canonical or non-inspired. They do accept it as having historical or theological interest, but they kind of don't want to accept it as canon, ergo they kind of want it out of the way. The Acts and Monuments, popularly known as Fox's Book of Martyrs, is a work of Protestant history and martyrology by Protestant English historian John Fox, first published in 1563 by John Day. It includes an account of the sufferings of Protestants under the Catholic Church, with particular emphasis on England and Scotland. Now, this book was highly influential in those countries and helped shape lasting popular notions of Catholicism there. The book went through 4 editions in Fox's lifetime, and a number of later editions and abridgments, including some that specifically reduced the text to a Book of Martyrs. After the Reformation, Catholic apologists raised the issue of the novelties of Protestant doctrines, as exploiting religious credulity for material and intercourse-related ends. So Protestant apologists such as Calvinist Anglican John Foxe sought to establish the continuity of a pro-Protestant piety from apostolic times to the Reformation. So yeah, the author's credibility was challenged as soon as the book first appeared. A lot of folks accused Foxe of dealing falsely with the evidence, misusing documents, and of telling partial truths. In every case that he could clarify, Foxe corrected errors in the second edition and the third and the fourth. But by this point, Foxe was considered a poor historian, in at least mainstream reference works. The 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica said this of Foxe: "The gross blunders due to carelessness have often been exposed, and there is no doubt that Foxe was only too ready to believe evil of the Catholics, and he cannot always be exonerated from the charge of willful falsification of evidence. It should, however, be remembered in his honor that his advocacy of religious toleration was far in advance of his day."
Number 5. The Grimoire of Pope Honorius. Now, this 17th century grimoire attributed to Pope Honorius III is said to contain a collection of magical rituals and incantations. However, this book is believed to be cursed by the devil, and those who dare to read its pages will be forever changed. One story actually tells of a young priest who, after reading the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, became obsessed with the occult, eventually even losing his faith and soul to the devil. The Grimoire of Pope Honorius has caused a lot of controversy, particularly among Catholic scholars and theologians. Now, the text attribution has been disputed, with some arguing that the text is a forgery or a hoax. Now, despite these theories, the text has been studied and used by numerous occultists and magicians, including Aleister Crowley as well. Number 6. The Book of the Secret of Secrets. This ancient text, attributed to the medieval alchemist Raza, is said to contain the secrets of alchemy and the occult. However, this book is believed by some to be cursed by the devil, and those who attempt to follow its instructions will be met with disaster and tragedy. Now, the Book of the Secret of Secrets has been the subject of a lot of criticism and controversy, particularly among scholars who have questioned, the authenticity and historical accuracy. Some have even argued that the text is a forgery or just actually a compilation of earlier sources. Number 7. The Key of Solomon. This ancient grimoire attributed to King Solomon is said to contain a collection of magical seals and incantations. However, this book is believed to be cursed by the devil, and those who use its power will be met with terrible consequences. There are two main versions of the Key of Solomon. One, the Clavicula Salomonis, or the Key of Solomon, which is the most well-known and widely used version, and two, the Lemegeton, or the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is a shorter and more concise version. In recent years, the Key of Solomon has been reinterpreted and recontextualized by modern scholars, and some have seen the text as just a source of inspiration for chaos magic and other forms of modern occultism. Number 8. The Book of Lies. This ancient text, attributed to the medieval occultist Aleister Crowley, is said to contain a collection of mystical and magical teachings. However, this book is believed to be cursed, again, by the devil, and those who attempt to follow its instructions will be met with mayhem. Now, one legend tells of a young occultist who, after reading the Book of Lies, became obsessed with the pursuit of having magical powers. Eventually, he lost his grip on reality and descended into madness. The Book of Lies is structured as a series of paradoxical, and often contradictory statements, each designed to challenge the reader's perceptions and understandings of the world as we know it. The chapters cover a wide range of topics, including 1. The nature of truth and reality, 2. The role of the individual in society, 3. The relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm, 4. The secrets of magic and spiritual growth. Number 9. The Necronomicon. This one takes us to the realm of horror and fantasy, where we find the infamous Necronomicon. This ancient text, created by H.P. Lovecraft, is said to contain the secrets of the Old Ones, ancient beings of immense power and malevolence. However, this book is believed to be cursed by the devil, and those who even dare to read its pages will apparently be driven mad by the eldritch horrors that lurk within. One story tells of a young scholar who, after reading it, became obsessed with the Old Ones, eventually losing his life in a very tragic ritual gone wrong. Lastly, number 10. The Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. The Munich Manual is a medieval grimoire that's said to contain powerful and forbidden knowledge of demonic magic. The book is believed to have been written in the 15th century by a German sorcerer who made a pact with the devil. The book's cursed reputation has also made it a popular topic in horror fiction and folklore. Now, according to legend, the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic is cursed by the devil himself. Anyone who attempts to read it or use the knowledge contained in the book is said to be cursed with bad luck, illness, and even being unalived. Whether or not you believe in the supernatural, these stories serve as a reminder of the power of knowledge and the dangers of delving too deep into the mysteries of the unknown. Thanks so much for watching. I'm your host Ashley, and until next time, stay scared. I have a question for you. Do you want to start sleeping with the lights on? If so, I got you. The most horrifying found footage that will leave you shaking while I take fear factor to a whole new level. First up, we have the infamous Dybbuk Box. You might have heard of this story before, but for those who haven't, let me fill you in. As the story goes, a Dybbuk Box appeared in 2003 when antique store owner Kevin Mannis bought a vintage wine box from a 103-year-old Holocaust survivor on eBay. After a strange string of unexplained hauntings, reoccurring nightmares, bruises, and smells of ammonia, the box found its way back onto eBay and landed in the hands of a man named Jason Haxton. Now, he too felt the wrath of the box and ended up burying it somewhere in Missouri, but not before pulling it out of the ground to appear on the television show Ghost Adventures. Haxton had paid $280 for the box, and when opened, contained a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies from the 1920s, a dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters.
Heinrich Himmler's personal grimoire. If you're unfamiliar with the name, Double H was one of the leading members of the Yahtzee party, so my verbiage might get interesting for the next little bit. Double H founded the Ahnenerbe, which was a pseudo-scientific organization that was active between 1935 to 1945 and devoted to the task of promoting the racial beliefs held by the Yahtzees. Himmler was very much drawn to the occult and tied this interest into his racist philosophy, looking for proof of Aryan and Nordic racial superiority from ancient times. He promoted a cult of ancestor worship, particularly among members of the SS, as a way to keep the race pure and provide immortality to the nation. Viewing the SS as an order along the lines of the Teutonic Knights, he had them take over the church of said order in Vienna in 1939. He began the process of replacing Christianity with a new moral code that rejected humanitarianism and challenged the Christian concept of marriage. Himmler modified a variety of existing customs to emphasize the elitism and central role of the SS. An SS naming ceremony was to replace baptism, marriage ceremonies were to be altered, a separate SS funeral ceremony was to be held in addition to Christian ceremonies, and SS-centric celebrations of the summer and winter solstices were instituted. Historian Nicholas Goodrick Clark analyzed all of this in his 1985 book, The Occult Roots of Yahtzeism, in which he argued that there were in fact links between some ideals of Ariosophy and Yahtzee ideology. He also analyzed the problems of the numerous popular occult historiography books written on the topic. In Goodrick Clark's review, the Ariosophist movement built on the early ideas of the Volkisch movement, a traditionalist pan-German response to industrialization and urbanization, but associated the problems of modernism, specifically with the supposed misdeeds of Freemasonry, Kabbalah, and let's see if I can get this one right, folks, Rosicrucianism, in order to prove the modern world was based on false and evil principles. The Ariosophist ideals and symbols filtered through several anti-Semitic and nationalist groups in late Wilhelmian Germany, from which the early Yahtzee party emerged in Munich after the First World War. He demonstrated quite a few links between 2 Ariosophists and Heinrich Himmler. An article titled Schmittler's Forgotten Library by Timothy Ryback, published in The Atlantic, mentions a book from the Dictator's Private Library, authored by Ernst Schertl. Now, Ernst, whose interests were flagellation, dance, occultism, nudism, and quinky things, had also been active as an activist for sexual liberation before 1933. Now, supposedly there is some remnant of Yahtzee magic that can be gleaned from a study of ice magic, and through the work of Blavatsky. Nevertheless, I wouldn't recommend bringing that strain of magic back into the world. Never mind finding Himmler's secret grimoire. No thanks. Next up is less a singular spellbook, but more so any grimoire or spellbook that promises an expertise in BLOOD magic. Sorry folks, the interwebs are not a fan of the B word, so I have to find substitutes for the redness that pours out of a human wound. When it comes to practitioners of said magic, it's similar, if not exactly the same, as to how the Aztecs wielded power. This might sound kind of cliche, but power like that always comes with a price, which is the reason the Aztecs killed so many people. They avoided the cost by using prisoners, or folks they deemed the the lowest of the low. With so much death at ritualistic points where the veil is thin, they could commune or even summon dark entities to the physical realm. So while the idea of forbidden knowledge may seem fun or rebellious or even glamorous, there's things you just shouldn't mess with in the first place. If you're looking for a specific title to avoid, one that I've talked about plenty on here that touches on the subject is the Grimorium Verum. Translated as the Grimoire of Truth, this text has a reputation that goes without saying. It originated in the 18th century and is part of European magical tradition. And it's not for the faint of heart. The Grimorium Verum is essentially a guidebook, but not the kind you'd find on your local bookstore's bestseller shelf. Nah, this is more like a how-to manual for dealing with entities not exactly on the Christmas card list. The inclusion of red fluids in its rituals is one of its most chilling aspects, if you ask me. I don't really like seeing redness anywhere. It's not the kind of magic you see in fairy tales. This is the stuff of dark alleys and ancient rites. The text details ceremonies involving the shedding of said fluids to summon and control otherworldly beings. It's a kind of forbidden knowledge that's been whispered about in hushed tones throughout history. Like, it's just like you hear about it, you don't talk about it. Also, it doesn't stop at fluid exchanges. Like, it's an overall comprehensive guide to dealing with demons. Like, if you want to make a pact with a demon, yeah, this is the place for it. It's got the instructions for creating a pact, specific prayers and invocations. Technically, it's like a step-by-step guide for anybody seeking supernatural assistance. Whether that's a good idea or not, that's up for debate. So why was this banned? And why should you not be reading it? Well, let's just say the church, who we all love, wasn't exactly thrilled with people trying to summon demons on a random Tuesday afternoon. The church authorities saw these texts as a threat, not just to the spiritual well-being of their practitioners, but also to the established order. If there's one thing we know about the church, they don't like being threatened. After all, summoning demons and dabbling in fluid magic doesn't exactly align with a Sunday sermon. Not that I personally agree with the church on most things, but this might be the one time I do. You don't want a demon at Thanksgiving. Memoirs of a Woman of Pleasure, popularly known as Fanny Hill, is a naughty novel by the English novelist John Cleland, first published in London in 1748. Written while the author was in debtor's prison in London, it is considered the first original English prose smut, and the first smut to use the form of the novel. It is one of the most prosecuted and banned books in history. This book exemplifies the use of euphemism. The text has no swearing or explicit scientific terms for body parts, but it uses a lot of literary devices to describe genitalia. For example, the hoo-ha is sometimes referred to as the nethermouth, which is also an example of psychological displacement. A critical edition by Peter Saber includes a bibliography and a lot of notes that are kind of useful. The collection launching Fanny Hill contains several essays on the historical, social, and economic themes underlying the novel. Initially, there was actually no government reaction to it, but in November of 1749, a year after the first installment was published, the author and Ralph Griffiths were arrested and charged with corrupting the king's subjects. So the book eventually made its way to the US, and by 1821, a Massachusetts court outlawed it completely. The publisher, Peter Holmes, was convicted for printing a lewd and obscene novel. So, Holmes appealed to the Massachusetts Supreme Court. He claimed that the judge, relying only on the prosecution's description, hadn't even seen the book. The state Supreme Court was not swayed. The Chief Justice wrote that Holmes was a scandalous and evil-disposed person who had contrived to debauch and corrupt the citizens of Massachusetts, and to raise and create in their minds inordinate and lustful desires. In 1963, after the 1960 court decision in R vs. Penguin Books Limited that allowed the continuing publication of Lady Chatterley's Lover, Gareth Powell's Mayflower Books published an uncensored paperback version of Fanny Hill. The police became aware of the 1963 edition a couple days before publication, having spotted a sign in the window of the magic shop in Tottenham Court Road in London, run by Ralph Gold. Well, an officer went to the shop, bought a copy, and delivered it to a magistrate, Sir Robert Blundell, who issued a search warrant. At the same time, 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police's Obscene Publications branch visited Mayflower Books. Why? Well, they wanted to determine whether copies of the books were kept on the premises. They interviewed Powell, the publisher, and took away 5 copies. Just 5. Well, then the police returned to the magic shop and seized 171 copies of the book. And in December, Gold was summoned under Section 3 of the Obscene Publications Act. By then, Mayflower had distributed 82,000 copies of the book, but it was Gold who was being tried. But Mayflower did cover the legal costs. The trial took place in February of 1964, and the defense argued that Fanny Hill was a historical source book, and that it was a joyful celebration of normal, non-icky intercourse. You know, it was bawdy rather than sinful. Well, the prosecution countered by stressing one atypical scene involving flagellation, and they won. Written in Bastille during the French Revolution, the 120 Days of Sodom is a heck of a book. So the author was actually interrupted when the prison was stormed by insurgents and never finished the story. But it remains amongst the most notorious works of literature throughout history, featuring a lot of depraved stuff, red fluid-soaked naughty group parties, torment and under the age of consent, batty icky things, and a lot more that I can't say because the internet's a fun place. Described as very naughty, its plot revolves around the activities of 4 wealthy libertine men seeking out the ultimate way of gratifying themselves through group parties, sealing themselves away in an inaccessible castle in the heart of the Black Forest in Germany with 4 madams and a harem of 36 victims. The madams relate stories of their most memorable clients, whose crimes and punishments inspire the libertines to likewise and increasingly harm their victims to their eventual deaths. Now, this novel was actually never completed. Its first chapter was written according to Sade's written plan, but the subsequent chapters are in the form of rough drafts and notes, often consisting of graphic descriptions of the novel's scenes. So this book was first published in Germany in 1904 and then banned across Europe for much of the 20th century. In 1975, film adaptation was also banned in several countries. South Korea has banned the book twice this century, and now it can only be sold there if you're like 19 or up. And finally for today, Mein Kampf is a book that should really only exist in a museum so that we don't turn into a case of those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. This is an autobiography of Germany's infamous, actually Austrian-born dictator. Its title means My Struggle, because yeah, okie dokie dude. It's been described as like, hey everybody, give this man, a big round of applause for his perseverance, his sheer determination, because hard work makes dreams come true. The book, released in 2 volumes, is in reality the evil dictator's case for all the bad things he did. He outlines exactly how he came to be, well, who he was, before putting forth his views and describing his vision for the future of Germany. Interestingly enough, Germany actually held the copyright over it until 2016, and until then, printing and distributing this book was banned. But now that it's in the public domain, well, the ban's been lifted. There was actually a new edition released a little while back, but still, when you think about who wrote it, I'm not saying it should be completely erased from history, but maybe it should just be kept in a museum.